Still on the search of that one true love? On the limbo in this crazy world of dating, marriage, relationships? Well, listen to the Golden State Media Concepts Relationship Podcast, your one-stop podcast for everything about relationships.
Hello and welcome to Golden State Media Concepts Relationships Podcast, and I'm your host, John Johnson. This podcast is being brought to you by Care Of. Now, Care Of is a subscription service that makes it easy to get vitamins, protein powders, and more that are personalized just for you and delivered straight to your door. And after the first segment, I'm going to talk a little bit more about Care Of and explain how you can get 30% off your first order. Remember, this is Care Of. They're a subscription service that makes it easy to get vitamins, protein powders, and more delivered just for you straight to your door. Care Of. We'll be talking about that in a little bit. This podcast, I'm going to talk about when a loved one faces adversity. Now, I'm sure we can all relate to an experience that we've had when there's somebody that we know, somebody we care about, is facing a rough time. In our own hearts, I think we want to reach out to them and help them make the pain go away. And there could be all kinds of reasons. It could be a situation that happened to them that they're just having to face. It could be even a situation that they have brought onto themselves, but it is causing a lot of suffering. Now, one of the difficult things in this is how much of a hand do we reach out to individuals like that? You know, it might even be a situation where if it's our child, it affects us personally. And it could be emotionally, it could be financially, you know, not just the fact that it might have been a situation that repeats itself, and it could even be a result of some dysfunction. But the idea is when that individual is going through a rough time, we see their pain, we feel their pain. And a lot of that is our own empathy coming out. Because if we've experienced the same kind of thing and we know how difficult it is, then maybe we feel like it's our duty to help that other person not suffer so much. Well, that definitely becomes something to consider when we see that they are going through such a tough time. But therein, we don't necessarily want to become an enabler. And if we short circuit their learning of this situation, obviously it's bound to repeat again. Because most things in life don't happen just once. They happen multiple times until you learn to deal with it, and then you can move on. I think that's sort of the end of the lesson, and then you go to the next situation. But how do we get there? We get there oftentimes because our way of operating, maybe it's because there's a lot of dysfunction and it's a learned behavior. Other times it is our own failure to want to face up to the responsibility that we have. And it brings about these circumstances time and time again. I think we all know someone who seems to have trouble that they face on a continual basis. And we often wonder, well, what is it going to take for that person to finally get it right? I mean, you wonder in situations because you've seen people that have been given handouts after handout after handout, and they just don't seem to make this thing work. Not that they haven't suffered, but you wonder for them, when are they going to get it right? Now, when we're talking about our own kids, it's very, very hard to be detached. It's very hard, you know, and I say kids, I mean loved one, you know, anything in that spectrum. It's very hard to be detached. But remember that part I said about enabling. And I want to reach back to something of the word empathy. And I've mentioned this from time to time on my podcast. And the thing that I want to say about this is that that's a very important thing to have as a human being, empathy for others. I think it helps us in our call to action to want to do something when we see something isn't right. When we sense another human being is suffering, then we want to help change that situation, maybe help change their fate. And that's always, I think that's always at the forefront of a lot of these situations. I'm sure that we have felt grace from other people, and we love the fact that somebody gave us an assist when we needed it. And I think it's great to want to pay it forward. But we have to use a certain amount of wisdom when we're reaching out and helping somebody else, because we don't want to short circuit their learning. And adversity has the capacity to shape the rough edges of us. It has the capacity to refine us to the place where it teaches us boundaries. And this is a very important something to learn in life. Every one of us has our own life, and we all face situations, and we have to learn to navigate our way through it, whether it's in other relationships, whether it's in circumstances dealing with money, when to speak, when not to speak. There's lots of things to experience as a human being. And for our love of someone and wanting to have them have the best experience, here's something to remember. The fact that you may short circuit that learning experience doesn't necessarily help them. And understand that I use the word short circuit. And by that, I mean that you cut off part of what they would experience, which may give them the tools they need in order to learn the boundaries. And something that happens oftentimes is people get those lessons over and over and over. It's easier earlier in the process. They may not understand the impact of what they're learning, but to some degree they learn it. And it shapes their life, and it changes their trajectory. If some of these life's lessons happen later on, and I realize this is a philosophical point that I'm making, but if some of these lessons happen later on, then a lot of things that they've had to endure may have been a lot less if they had just either had the patience, had the wisdom, or maybe somebody in their sphere of influence had done just a little bit less and maybe steered them in the right direction. Not so much did it for them, but maybe gave them a little bit of advice, a little bit of counseling. I'm, in a sense, against some of the bailouts that happen for individuals because people bring a lot of difficulty and trouble and strife on themselves, and best left to them to be humbled and then come to a better way of reacting or being in those situations rather than crying for help and then you jumping in. And I know the difficulty that one faces in dealing with loved ones. I have kids, and many times I have wanted to change the outcome for them, and I could with waving the magic wand. But then I've had to stop and think, what's the impact of what I do right now for them? I mean, I can always say, well, yeah, they've suffered enough. And on many occasions, I have done so. But I have also had to learn from my own experience. There are a lot of things that my kids did that I didn't do. And I was very surprised at some of the choices that they made. And the reason I say surprised is because many of these things were the kinds of discussions that a parent has with the kid just so they understand, okay, this is the situation, this is the circumstances, this is what you do. But, people are like scientists. They experiment with things all the time and test the outcome. And sometimes it's very interesting, very good outcome, and other times it's like, ooh, wow, they wish they hadn't done that, and they learn their lessons and move on. So I'm going to take a break right now, but I'm going to come back and talk about this subject some more. Hey, listeners, this is John Johnson, and I am the host of the Relationship Podcast. I have the distinct pleasure of partnering with Care Of. Now, Care Of is a subscription service that makes it easy to get vitamins, protein powders, and more, which are personalized just for you and delivered straight to your door. Look, with the wintertime blues coming to an end, it's finally time to get back into a routine that empowers you to feel your healthiest. So give yourself the support this season with a boost. Whether you're looking for energy, better sleep, to maintain stress, or something else you need to feel your healthiest, Care Of's fun online quiz will ask you about your diet, health goals, and lifestyle choices. Look, it only takes about 5 minutes to find out your personalized, scientifically backed recommendation for vitamins, protein powders, and more. The online quiz is now new and improved to learn if you're getting enough fiber, protein, and good fats to determine if you could benefit from Care Of's new protein powders. Look, it can be really hard to know what vitamins or supplements you should be taking, but Care Of makes it easy to find out what you specifically need to be your healthiest. Look, Care Of delivers daily vitamin and supplement packs along with protein and more. Look, they're all customized to your recommendations, so you're only taking what you really need. Your personalized Care Of subscription box gets sent right to your door every month with personalized daily packs, which are great for a busy on-the-go lifestyle, and they even say your name on them. The Care Of's delicious nutrient-packed quick stick powders can be added to your monthly delivery for an extra easy boost whenever you need it. They now offer protein powders available in individual packets for on the go and in tubs. Like I said, they're all personalized to your fitness goals and dietary preferences. So Care Of makes sure that you're getting vitamins and protein from the best sources backed by honest guidance and transparency. Their new protein powders have clean labels and are made with organic ingredients like cocoa and Himalayan pink sea salt or whey from free-range grass-fed cows from Ireland. Vegan and vegetarian supplement options are available to match your dietary needs. So you can track your progress with the Care Of app and earn rewards when you remember to take your vitamins. So think about that. You get the Care Of difference, their online quiz, their healthy routine, plus they're easy and convenient. Now, to get that 30% off, I want you to go online to Take Care Of. That's all one word. TakeCareof.com. That's takecareof.com and enter promo code RELATIONSHIP30. That's going to get you 30% off your first order. So experience the Take Care Of difference and get 30% off. Hello, and we're back. This is John Johnson with the Golden State Media Concepts Relationships Podcast, and I'm talking about when loved ones face adversity. Now, at the end of that first segment, I was talking about kids who sort of experiment with things and get into a little bit of a situation, and how we as parents sometimes want to dive in and fix it. And a lot of times, there are things that we do fix. Okay, we bring them up. We're there to protect them. We help them get through life, and sometimes we have to let them bounce off the padded walls for a while to learn that there's things that they can't do and or should do, and we call those boundaries. But this diving in part, where this goes is this really more of a reflection of who we are as individuals, as parents, and I'm going to talk about this in really the nicest way. But as an individual, when you experience something and you don't have such a good time with it, when you see somebody else going through it, you naturally have that response of what it was like for you. And remember that empathy thing I talked about? And, there's that memory. It just sort of comes back anytime we see that. So therefore, when it's our kids, there's a couple of things that are happening. There's the experience of, wow, it's not going so well for them. And, sometimes it even goes a little further. You're thinking about geez, man, that's going to cost me. Let's say your kid goes out and they're riding their scooter and they smash into the neighbor's car. Yeah, you're responsible, for them until they're a certain age. So yeah, we don't want them going out and doing those kind of things. But it's the other experiences I'm talking about. It's how they treat other people. It's when they might have a little bit of a squabble with a friend. You can give them some coaching and hope that they develop a better attitude and a lot more civil. But they are going to do things their way until they learn that maybe parents do have good advice, or in kids living their own life realize that they get put to the side or they get ignored when they don't say follow what would be a better way to behave. And I'm going to say it nicely like that. In as much as they're individuals, but coming back to the part about what you as a parent face, what you do in these situations a lot of times is a reflection on who you are, or even in situations like this, a projection, because we don't always know how that's going to land on them. We have an idea, probably based on our experience, but each individual is an individual. But let's just give it for the sake of the understanding about what's happening to you, because remember, this is about you when a loved one faces adversity, how you behave in the situation. Sometimes we overreach. Sometimes we invest ourselves in a way that that sometimes doesn't really help, because and remember in that first segment I talked about short circuiting the learning. This happens all the time, and when we do that in somebody else's life and somebody else's experience, then they don't get to learn from that situation that might better serve them to teach them boundaries. And this is a big thing in life. People experiment all the time with stuff, whether it's drugs, whether it's alcohol, whether it's, whatever. And sometimes experiments are best left in a laboratory where it's a controlled environment. And in life out there on the streets, it is sort of a controlled environment. There is the thing that, what you put out there gets mirrored back to you in some way, shape, or form. And if you put out a lot of garbage, it's going to come back at you multifold. And I think that's one of the things that we learn that helps us then say, okay, I'm not going to do that. Next time I'm going to do this because it has a better outcome. And I mean, if you're a person that pops off, you'll probably wind up popping off to the wrong person one day and then get it back at you and get a good scare. So then you learn not to run your mouth. You learn to be a little more civil or to speak in kind words. That doesn't happen for everybody, but I think for the average person, that's one of the things that helps them learn some boundaries. And you can't necessarily teach that to people. They have to learn it in their own time. And when they get it, I think it makes them a better person. But that's just an illustration of somebody really learning some boundaries about where negative behavior can take you. I like the experiences that people get when, you reinforce some of the positive things. And there's a lot of that out there in the world to want to see happen. For example, if your kid sees something that's lost and they take it to the lost and found rather than trying to take ownership of it just because they say, well, it doesn't belong to somebody else because I see it laying on the street. Well, I was one of those that was taught just because you see it laying there doesn't mean you get to take ownership of it. Somebody lost it. And I default to that first, because we all are going to experience that where we lose something and we would hope that somebody would, quote unquote, do the right thing and try to help it get back to us. See, that's one of those experiences where empathy really teaches you that you can have a different outcome and you can reasonably want to expect others to behave the way you would behave. And if you're a person that thinks nothing of picking up something and taking it for yourself without trying to at least find an owner, well, I can most likely assume that that's the kind of thing that's going to happen to you. And when you start dealing with things that are more and more important to you, I think this is a lesson that you learn because you get hurt by it. You get hurt by your own experience of how you behave. And sometimes that's a really hard lesson to learn because you have to look at yourself in the mirror. But it goes a direction of teaching you that there is a right way and a not so right way to behave. I've got to take a break, but I'll be right back after this.
The Golden State Media Concepts Travel Podcast, the show that gives you advice on everything travel. We explore places you've always wanted to go, as well as giving tips for traveling in those places. We'll give you advice on the best sites for travel tips, information, and discounts. Join us as we travel the world, explore cultures, and meet new people. The Golden State Media Concepts Travel Podcast has got you covered. Download the GSMC Travel Podcast on iTunes, Stitcher, SoundCloud, Google Play, or anywhere you find podcasts. Just type GSMC in the search bar.
Hi there. Welcome back to Golden State Media Concepts Relationships Podcast. I'm talking about when a loved one faces adversity. Now, in that last segment, I started to reach back and talk about how we oftentimes insert ourselves and our empathy into those circumstances, situations. It's obviously our experience that comes out, and that's how we want to read these situations. And when it comes to other people, we don't always know what that experience is going to be like. And of course, it can obviously be hard for us to sit back and watch things happen to people, especially when we think they're headed right for the edge of the road and not want to at least try to do something about that. Now, I would certainly call you to action if you feel like somebody's in a really harmful, a potentially harmful situation. And, you know, there is your life's experience to draw from. So definitely speak up on that. But I think where this really comes into play is how much do you insert yourself? And when we've had our own experiences, then that tends to shape our behavior in as much as this experience would shape their behavior, or their experience would shape their behavior. And, you know, you have to weigh the differences. You have to see sometimes it's a different day and different time, and it's going to be a different outcome. And sometimes the things that help us really make a determination as to how far we are going to get involved in someone else's life is when we determine how expensive it's going to be to us. And, you know, not just monetarily, you know, sometimes it's emotionally, but they're in the case of when money is a factor. Like, say, for example, you have someone that constantly comes to you for a bailout, meaning money or something, because they keep creating drama in their own life that's too expensive for them to be able to fix. Well, there comes a time when you need to let them really stew in their own stuff and not bail them out, because you're not helping them. Because you can tell when individuals keep coming back to you, because there's one thing about individuals in life who know where they can get the next, let's say, handout from. Yeah, it's almost as if you have it written on your face. They know how to find those individuals. And if you have, oh, I'm going to loan you or give you this, they come to you and they keep coming to your door until you stop. And sometimes these things are about self-preservation. If not just your wallet, but maybe your own emotional state, because it probably puts you in a sense of turmoil when you have to continue to bail someone else out. You probably wonder, and I know a lot of parents go through this, and even the case where you have parents, you have couples, you have one person, the mom or the dad or one of the two wants to do it, and the other one says, no, we've done this over and over. Now, that obviously can create a lot of stress and strife in relationships. So, you know, the parents sometimes have to take a real step back and have these conversations outside of these crises so that you don't have one parent sort of going behind the back of the other. Now, every relationship is its own, and if it's one of those things that really brings stuff to a head, you might need a referee. And I've obviously seen these kinds of things happen. I think we've known people that have had these kinds of circumstances, and obviously being in it doesn't make it easy. It doesn't make it better. Sometimes going through those kinds of things is even worse than either saying yes or no to the person. Because if you're in conflict with your spouse, then that's another added layer to this whole experience. And it certainly makes you want to have nothing to do with these things. Because why would I want to go into conflict with my significant other because somebody else brings drama to my door? You see, that's the connection. And through these experiences, we learn boundaries all the time. As young people, we learn boundaries. As we move on up in age, we learn boundaries, and we continue to build on that. And it's supposed to make our life better. That's where the learning comes in. And if you're open to the lesson, then you don't have to keep getting hit with stuff like this. I mean, it may be a new situation per se, but it's the same old lesson. And I think you know what I mean. And it's about really turning these things around and being able to make it work for you. And I like it when you can recognize something that's coming down the road and just avoid it. You know, like the Matrix, it's like you kind of step back and you can lean, and it just that problem just passes you right on by and goes on to the next person. See, that's a success in life. It's not always easy. It really isn't always easy to do that. Sometimes it's easier to recognize it, but it can be hard to say no to someone because you might feel that on some level you're turning somebody away. You feel so much empathy that what would it be like if you were in that situation? Well, sometimes you have to look at it and say, look, I wouldn't be in that situation because I learned that lesson. And I can certainly attest to having known individuals that really gave so much of themselves that they were a martyr. Now, that is a hard place to be because you can really start creating your own hardships because you are trying so hard to bail somebody else out. Now, that is something for you to look at. And again, I think that's something about boundaries, but you need to learn to see those kinds of things coming. And when you feel that kind of pressure and that kind of tension, it really is time to take a step back and start looking at this from a different angle. If you need a counselor or if you need to talk to your pastor, if it's a spiritual coach you need, then be in that conversation so that you can rethink how you're operating. Because this also is an opportunity for you. And it may mean a step back in time, a trip in the Wayback Machine, if they will, to look at how things were put together for you. And I think once you learn how your past becomes your present or your future, your past becomes your future, then you can learn to correct the kinds of things and give you a quality of life. Because remember, you're giving of yourself. And that always feels good when you know you're doing it for a reason and it's going to have a good outcome, when you know somebody's going to appreciate it. But if it's something that gets discarded or gets wasted or thrown away, that can't feel good. So sometimes that is part of your self-preservation. And don't be afraid to look at it in those terms. That's not being greedy. That's not necessarily being selfish. That's really being thoughtful and putting yourself, giving yourself value. Self-worth is so important. That's not selfish, or in a sense it is. Being selfish in a good way. That's not greedy. That's really being thoughtful and that part of self-preservation, because how can you help somebody else if you're not okay? I know sometimes we tend to think of it the other way, and I think that teaches us that we do have the capacity to be very thoughtful, loving, and giving, sometimes more than we realize. But in the example that I'm talking about, again, it's about learning how to set boundaries, how to do it in a very nice and tactful way, and not have any shame about it. But it also helps other people learn that they need to be responsible for themselves. That's a good thing. That's an example that you want to set not only for yourself, but in the case of children who have an experience under your authority, under your roof. They need that. They need to see that. They need to see that kind of strength and that character, because it also helps them have permission to say no. And that's a very important thing to be able to do in life, is to be able to say no, because we are under influences all the time. I mean, just think about it. You watch something on TV, it's an advertiser, they've crafted that advertisement to appeal to you. Sometimes it's something that's going to really benefit you. And then other times it's just a bunch of fluff. And you really have to learn to know the difference. Think about where you are in life. Think about what happens when a loved one faces adversity. How are you going to handle it? I'm John Johnson. This is the Golden State Media Concepts Relationships Podcast.
You've been listening to the Golden State Media Concepts Relationship Podcast, part of the Golden State Media Concepts Podcast Network. You can find this show and others like it at www.gsmcpodcast.com. Download our podcast on iTunes, Stitcher, SoundCloud, and Google Play. Just type in GSMC to find all the shows from the Golden State Media Concepts Podcast Network, from movies to music, from sports to entertainment, and even weird news. You can also follow us on Twitter and on Facebook. Thank you, and we hope you have enjoyed today's program.